Hello, welcome to another episode of the IoT webinar series. My name is Christian Henke and I'm the Director of Product Marketing at emnify. We know building IoT products is complex, and this is why I'm inviting to every episode an IoT industry expert. The expert will give you key tips and tricks on how to solve technical challenges and how to scale your product and operation. If you like the topic or have suggestions for a new one, subscribe to our emnify YouTube channel and leave a comment. Now let's get started. Hello, I'm super excited to have another industry expert with me, this time from the healthcare industry. Today I'm joined by Jacob Skinner, CEO of Thrive Wearables. We're going to talk about how wearable technology in health and wellness can be applied in the industry, especially considering the impact of COVID-19. So we will discuss around the following 4 topics: the history and technologies that made wearable health technology feasible, how COVID has impacted certain industries and how wearables can be applied. Of course, we're also going to talk about the connectivity choice for wearable devices and what does the future bring for wearable health tech. I hope you liked the webinar. So Jacob, now without further ado, can you please introduce yourself and your company and which customer problems you're solving?
Okay, well, I'll just jump in from where I left off. So if people didn't hear before, my background is in sensor technologies and I've been in wearable tech for about 10 years. Have recently, in the last 7 years, started Thrive Wearables, and we are a team focused completely on creating wearable technology products and having significant impact in that space, trying to create technologies that change how healthcare is provided. And it's a very exciting time for that industry. So we're going to talk a bit about some of those opportunities in a moment. Just to cover the basics of what Thrive do and where we're from, we cover projects all over the globe, including Germany and a lot of stuff going on in Europe, as you might imagine. We cover physical device development, digital interface development, and also we do quite a bit of data science as well, really specifically data science that relates to wearable type signals. So physiology being the main thing, looking at heart signals, for example, and understanding various conditions or various problems people might have in relation to their heart health. So data science is a really important component of what we do. We have worked on around 60 projects in the space. We've worked on all sorts of different form factors, and we have a really strong network of collaborators, of providers of technology, and we're recognized as kind of being quite influential within the world of wearable tech and the conversations that are going on at the moment out there. Quite a small team of 20 at the moment in-house. We're recruiting at the moment, so if anyone's interested in getting involved in wearable tech, please do reach out and have a chat. Lots of different brands that we've worked with, ranging from Unilever all the way down to the smaller startups with very innovative, pioneering ideas. And we try to get involved in quite a lot of things across that whole spectrum of sort of client size in order to get more understanding of the problems that are being faced and the challenges that people are trying to confront. And I won't cover that one because it's a bit detailed, but basically we are a sort of one-shop stop when it comes to wearable tech. We do all the things from concept and innovation right the way through to delivering things to mass production. So we kind of cover everything. We really take our clients on that journey and make sure that they have everything they need. We can act as an outsourced CTO if we're looking at a smaller startup or a scale-up company, or we could be working as a sort of product owner, delivering particular parts of the product portfolio or particular product line in collaboration. And we do quite a bit of other work as well, which I won't go into at this point. Christian, I'll hand back to you to introduce the topic.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, so maybe to recap, happy to have Jacob here, and we're going to talk in different sections, right? So we will have a discussion, but you will also have the possibility to ask questions. Actually, we're always encouraged to do so. And maybe Jacob, we start off. I have a health wearable device, my fitness band, but that is beyond that, right? So, but it's for me, it's also a recent development. So can you maybe go into which technology advances made these health wearable devices possible?
Yeah, it's a really the question is really relevant to my journey within wearables specifically, and how Thrive has come about really. And I was thinking about some of the historical foundations to wearable tech, and one of the biggest blocks of technology that's been created that's fed into wearable tech as we see it nowadays is hearing aid technology, interestingly. So hearing aid companies have been around for a very long time. So the early 80s, people were using wearable tech to improve their hearing and to augment their hearing. And it's really interesting looking at those devices and understanding just how pioneering they were, just how cutting edge that technology was. Because even now, we are still looking at similar kind of technologies and getting excited about them. But actually, the people in the hearing aid industry are looking at wearable tech and sort of saying, well, we've been doing this for 40 years, you know. So that's one of the sort of, I guess, one of the success stories historically with wearables. In the more recent times, we've seen a big hype in wearable technology, maybe 5 years ago. Google Glass, Fitbit as a brand, you know, there were various things that happened around that time that caused people to get excited, and then very quickly to get less excited because the use cases were poor, the user experience was terrible, and actually the building blocks for the technology in those devices was pretty rudimentary as well. And it's been a very significant challenge to establish new technologies to build new modern wearables on the back of that point in time. The public became disillusioned by those technologies and kind of disappeared, which took the pressure off a little bit. As wearable tech developers, we were able to spend a bit of time kind of getting our house in order when it comes to the core technologies, when it comes to what's needed to actually make things accessible and exciting to people. And one of the things that's really switched the opportunity on is new building blocks from silicon suppliers, from those out there in industry who have recognized how big wearable tech could be, and they've started catering specifically to the needs of wearable tech. So sensors, Bosch are a good example of a German company who I've got a lot of respect for and have a really great product line, really tailored towards wearables. And all the major companies are investing in wearables heavily now, not least coincidentally or ironically because of how much traction Apple have got in the space. The earbud technology, or AirBuds, or whatever they called, those have really excited the consumer market again, and the revenue that they've generated from that particular single product line is so huge that all the big teams, all the big manufacturers are now completely committed and building things, fundamental building blocks that are really accessible to us as designers and can be used in all sorts of new applications. So it's those technology building blocks which is the switch that's turned the industry on.
Yeah, it sounds like a gold mine, right? Or like a new journey, because now the building blocks are available and you can actually adjust them to the different use cases. Now let's go a little bit into our topic, looking at the recent change due to COVID. What do you think? How can help health wearable devices in this post-pandemic or still ongoing pandemic in different industry cases?
Yeah, absolutely, and an ongoing and long tail, unfortunately, and it's taken its toll, I think, on a lot of people, and a lot of industries have suffered incredibly through this pandemic in the leisure and hospitality retail industries. But what we've really noticed is, as with the consumer interest in wearables through the things that Apple have done in the last few years, it's also the case that medical professionals have spotted how important this sort of technology could be in treating people with COVID, in looking at tracking and contact tracing, but also more long-term opportunities in home care. So being able to look after people at home, be able to monitor them and provide them with continuous information, or for indeed them to provide themselves with continuous information. Because as I mentioned earlier, I think before we got the audio sorted, there's real challenges in healthcare. It's a very reactive industry traditionally, and we always pick people up after they've had a fall, and we put people in ambulances and we sort problems out. We're brilliant at that. Most of the health systems are excellent at doing that, but what we're not good at is predicting and preventing things through understanding people on a long-term basis. And that's the most exciting thing that's happening, is capturing of long-term trend data, linking that with people's physiology, even with their genetics, all sorts of different bits of information can be brought together to create treatments in advance of there being acute problems. And I think that's the most exciting area coming out of COVID, is just the openness that people are starting to have now to actually embrace those areas of potential and to turn them into products and services that people can engage with.
Great. Yeah. Great. And I like that. So I understand Thrive is, you know, at the end building the full solution, right? So you have the different building blocks. What are the technical challenges when you have the different building blocks, and maybe also not only the technical but also the usability challenges that Thrive is working with and solving for the customer?
Yeah, usability, users is the key thing here. You know, with wearables, you are completely at the whim of people's either commitment or abandonment of your technology based upon how well you design it and how well you make it fit into their life, and the frictions that exist or don't exist within a product story and a product environment. So we're very focused on user experience and user design. But the challenges from a technical building blocks point of view, there are four main real areas of technology, I suppose, that go into a wearable. There are sensors that measure things. There are processors that deal with that information. There are networks that are connected to in order to transport that information. And then there are things like battery elements as well, which sound a bit trivial, but actually batteries are the biggest problem when it comes to wearables, because you need to power these things. They can often be quite power hungry if you're doing lots of measurements. So it's those kind of four areas that are the building blocks. And with the advent of these improved and amazing sensors that we're being offered now, and also the processing capabilities that exist now at very low power, we're kind of left with the networks and the batteries as the two things that really need to be considered. And with battery technology, that, you know, that's an ongoing issue. But with networks, we're seeing some really interesting changes. And you probably know more than I do about this whole area. But from an IoT and from a wearable point of view, I think what's essential is that we start to have networks that are much more dynamic to the types of data set that we're looking at. So low bandwidth in many cases, but ultra low latency being a really key driver in some cases. We've worked on projects that try to use 4G and those kind of technologies within a football stadium, for example, and trying to get signals around a football stadium when you've got sort of 50,000 people, a Premiership football match. Everything is dead. It's like there is no network at all. So you end up with these challenges that if you're going to have a wearable that relies on a network and relies on cloud processing or cloud computations of any sort or cloud data, the networks just don't support that at the moment. So it's really exciting to see some of the ideas around 5G in theory. I've not seen them in practice particularly yet, but I think the whole network kind of paradigm for wearables has to be almost universal. There has to be some kind of connectivity, whether it be through people's Wi-Fi, whether it be through localized 5G setups or other, until we get to the point where networks are completely reliable and the latency and the bandwidth issues are appropriate for wearables. It's very challenging, I have to say.
Yeah, unfortunately, 5G is not there yet for IoT. I think it's there for consumer devices, for smartphones, but I guess especially the wearable devices like the Apple Watch and so on, they're starting to catch up though. So I can see that there is 5G coming out there as well. I think also with the existing technologies, there is quite a good play within connectivity for health wearable devices. So you talked about the football field. Is there any other example or any other challenge you faced when working with connectivity, and how did you solve it?
I guess a good use case for wearables and networks or connectivity is around in-home type solutions that involve people who are cognitively impaired or are very elderly, and having use cases that involve those kind of people, you have to think through the user experience so so fine, and you have to remove all points of friction for them to work. So imagine a piece of wearable technology arriving in the post and being opened and used immediately. No configuration, no connections, nothing like that. Those are really interesting use cases because you have to start working out, for example, would you ship that device with an eSIM or with a SIM card of some sort on it? Would you ship that device with a wall connection that has a SIM card in it, so you can plug that wall connection in and immediately have a network and a system set up? So there's a lot of interest in those kind of applications where friction and all of that stuff has to disappear, not least because of how Apple run things and how frictionless many user experience things are with consumer stuff. But going into those more niche areas, there's lots of opportunity for better network connections, lower friction, less login, less credential management, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to imagine a way that those things can be improved, I suppose, to open that up to more application areas.
Yeah, and I mean, from our side, we see that, let's say, the Wi-Fi at home is the dominant connectivity technology, but the more and more cheap cellular connectivity is getting, actually cellular has some benefits because the device is working directly out of the box, and no matter if you have it at home or somewhere else. Jacob, so we will let's say increase a little bit of the time of the webinar. So we only wanted to do 30 minutes, but due to the audio issues, I would still continue. Is there any future predictions that you have around health wearables? What do you see, especially in light of COVID, and what maybe other technology advances are coming up, and how do you see the market evolving?
I mean, there's some obvious opportunities, I suppose. There's been a lot of investment in COVID-focused developments. So governments around the world have invested into what essentially can be seen as firefighting, really. So mask technology, for example, and there will be applications that come out of those things: asthma monitoring, hazardous materials, clean air type technology. So there are those kind of areas that have had immediate investment and have kind of been given a kick based upon COVID in the last few years. I go back to what I said about remote monitoring and in-home monitoring. Those kind of the core technologies that are being developed now in that space are going to have exponential applications. So there are going to be many companies coming out of that space with new offerings. We've had traditionally quite a few people in that space, but I think because of how problematic COVID has been, people are going to be thinking about those issues and those challenges for a long time, and it's going to accelerate those kind of applications. In terms of specific kind of form factors and technologies that I see coming along in the very near future, I think going back to what I said about hearing aid technology a while ago, there's some really exciting stuff happening with in-ear sensing, with cardio sensing in a hearable form factor. So I think at the moment we have Apple AirBuds and we have various other sports type devices that look at heart rate and those kind of things. But what we're going to see in the future is this long-term monitoring using these kind of technologies where you can listen to music, you can use them a few times a day, get a spot measurement of half an hour of data, and that be sufficient to drive a whole load of analytics and insight that may come from that data set. And what's really interesting is that you don't need the level of quality with that kind of measurement. So if you go to a doctor and have your heart measured with 12 leads of ECG, that's because you're measuring your heart for a very small period of time, and that's the end of the measurement. If you're looking at it continuously, you can start to smooth out some of the noise, and you can start to see things over that trend, that long-term period, which is really exciting. And I think that, we're working on a couple of applications in that space. There's just going to be tons of stuff that emerges from the types of data set that are collected. And more broadly, there is a drive to what I'm going to call consumerize medical technology. So we talk about an ECG monitor in a hospital versus a very crude single-ended measurement on a wrist device. Well, all of the different machines and measurements that go on in a hospital, there are people looking at all of those and thinking, is there a simpler version of this which will give sufficient information to drive useful insights? And that's incredible. There's so many amazing technologies in a hospital environment. Let's say 50%, 60, 70% cannot be ported, but there's a big chunk of devices in those hospitals that can be used in a simpler form factor, and those things are making their way into the consumer space, and that's really exciting because it opens up all those other doors in terms of long-term monitoring and remote monitoring.
Yeah, I always thought it's actually almost also the other way around with these Fitbits and so on. That actually now I'm looking forward actually to have this part of my health, their status checks, and especially looking at my family, the older people. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, we have a question from the audience, and this goes back to the connectivity, and I guess it's not a one type of question answer. It goes back to what you already discussed. What is the radio technology used to communicate with from the wearable? So you discussed the 4G for the stadium and the indoor. Do you want to add anything here?
The predominantly Bluetooth LE and Bluetooth 5.1, 5.2, those are the technologies that we use every day. You know, that's what things are built. Because we have a wearable, it talks to a mobile phone, the phone talks to the internet, and that's the basic infrastructure. That's normally how it's done. We've done wearables that communicate directly to the internet via a SIM card, you know, on board. We have had wearables that connect to Wi-Fi only. And then there are more novel systems, so you can use RFID, for example, and you can scan things as you pass them. You can be collecting data and have a scanning process. And there's a whole load of sort of more peripheral ones. But yeah, Bluetooth predominantly is where it's at for wearable connectivity 90% of the time.
Yeah, and there's a follow-up question: if LoRa and Sigfox for low power, if that is relevant in the health wearables?
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
If LoRa and Sigfox, that's two low power connectivity alternatives, if that is relevant in the health wearables market.
It is relevant. I guess it's very similar to the challenges that we have with existing cellular networks. It's about coverage and it's about reliability, and both of those systems, you know, have limited range at this, limited coverage at this stage. But yeah, they're of interest, and they've been around for a while now. I have to say, I haven't kept an eye in the last year or so where they've actually got to in terms of coverage. They are relevant. Data rates are an issue, and you know, with Sigfox, for example, that's a challenging amount of bandwidth to deal with very much in terms of physiology data. But if it's about, I know, for example, a fall alert, if there's just a single piece of information being exchanged from the wearable to indicate an event, for example, then it starts to be interesting. And also it's interesting for deployment on a bespoke, you know, case. So if you're looking at, for example, running a network at an event, you've got a huge amount of people in a smaller amount of space, and you want to set up a bespoke network for that particular event. That's interesting. We've done quite a bit of work with using Bluetooth as a location system as well. So it uses the Bluetooth protocol, but it uses advertisement packets to triangulate. So you have a set of receiver transmitter infrastructure set up in a particular location. You can pinpoint the position of the wearable, the user, very precisely in that. It's a very interesting technology, and we've got a couple of projects going on in that space at the moment. So that's a very much an RF play, but a very novel usage of Bluetooth for a different purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, I always see, like, you know, I always take the Tesla example of why LoRa and Sigfox are challenging, because you put a device out, and in the beginning it maybe just monitors the fall of a person, but as you roll out new features over software updates, then you start needing more bandwidth, which you don't have. So that's definitely a challenge. Jacob, it was there's another one, another question. Do you perceive wearables being used in clinical trials so remote or rural patients can be recruited?
Fantastic question. If I'd remembered, I would have covered this topic. Actually, it's an extremely hot topic at the moment. We're working with a couple of teams in the clinical trial space. Lots of excitement about using wearables for remote monitoring, using wearables to collect real-world data, and the challenges are historical in terms of people's behavior, people's culture, in terms of sort of seeing this shift and being able to engage with it. And I guess from a medical point of view, being able to look at the types of biomarkers that we can create with wearables and actually have confidence that they mean something that is familiar from previous biomarkers, previous approaches. So it's closing that knowledge, understanding, behavior gap that's the biggest challenge. From a technology point of view, it's a complete no-brainer. I mean, monitoring people with on-body technologies and taking really good quality data sets over long periods of time in relation to trial protocols is a it's a huge unmet need, and one, like I said, that we're really excited about working on. So if anyone's out there in that space and interested, please just get in touch and let's have a chat.
Great. The questions are coming, so I don't want to end without an unanswered question. So what level of security do you put into place to authenticate the wearable user and encrypt, decrypt data coming out of the wearable? I don't know if that is too technical, or if you
that's a great question.
You have to answer that.
Yeah, it's a good question. What a great audience. So I guess my first response to that is, it sounds like a bit of a sort of soundbite, but blockchain and blockchain-based technologies are extremely exciting for patient records, for healthcare information that is extremely sensitive. I'd love, again, to talk to anyone who's in that space wanting to work on those kind of Bluetooth technologies. And the interesting part about that is that by measuring physiological signals, you can create authentication at the root of those devices. So imagine looking at somebody's heart signals and being able to pick out a fingerprint essentially and authenticate that user against that chain of information. So from that perspective, at the sort of cutting edge, bleeding edge end of things, I think that's where the opportunity lies in the future. In terms of bread and butter security, well, I'm a pessimist when it comes to security generally. We live in a world where things are moving so fast that I think security protocols and the approach to those things can be very poor in some cases. When we're designing things, we adhere to best practice. We work with the right encryption technologies. We anonymize data. We store it in a safe way, and we have to interact with government protocol when it comes to interacting with health records and being involved with those sort of APIs. So I think there's an awful lot that could be done to improve all of that at source by using better technologies, fundamentally having less things stored in big vulnerable servers, having much more democratic authentication, use, sharing of data. But it's a very, very important topic, and one that probably would take up an entire webinar if we had some other experts on the call as well.
That's true. Hey, Jacob, and with that, I think that was the last question. I found still the topic, the discussion really, really exciting. Good insights from the industry, and also what Thrive is doing. And I hope it was useful for the audience. And Jacob, I'm sure we'll keep in contact, and maybe we have another session on security, or maybe one other part of what Thrive is doing. Glad that you were able to join us and were sharing the expertise with us.
Thank you, Christian. Really appreciate it. And thanks to the audience for bearing with us. And if anyone wants to connect, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn and say hi.
Okay, thank you. Then talk to you in the next webinar to the audience, and Jacob will follow up later. Bye-bye.